What's up, geeks and game masters? Welcome to the Hobby Hub. Your resident GM Gabe here, and today I'll be explaining my essential GM tips to help you set up your campaigns. If you're a brand new GM or are looking to become one, then this video is perfect for you. We've got some great tips coming up, so stay tuned. Now, without any further delay, let's equip our headbands of intellect and prepare ourselves to learn. So, the very first tip on this list will pretty much be the basis for every other tip in this video, and that is for you to know the rules. No matter what game you're playing, as a GM, you are not only the storyteller and catalyst for the story to continue, but you are also the referee. Anytime a player has a question, or if there's a rule that needs hammering out in the middle of a session, the final verdict will always fall upon you, and the last thing you want is to have to stop the flow of the session to look something up. It's totally immersion breaking. Furthermore, you want to know the rules because you want to always be fair when adjudicating a final verdict on a rule, whether you're house ruling or not. And lastly, knowing the rules will help with your credibility as a GM. I know it may sound odd to say, but if you're playing with a new group, they may be less interested in your game if you don't know how the game's mechanics work. Trust is very important in a group, and it's okay if you don't know everything right off the bat. Experience is the best teacher. Now, I do want to mention that although the rules are placed as a guideline for you to follow, it does not mean that it has to all be black and white. There can be a gray area, exceptions to the rules if you will. Things like this could involve a player wanting to do something a bit extra that the rules don't necessarily account for, like if one of my players wanted to cut the head off of the evil tyrant while going for the final blow. I wouldn't ask them to roll a strength check to attempt to cleave through their neck. I would simply say it happens if they manage to kill them. This is what we in the nerd community call flavor. Flavor is okay, as long as it's not game-breaking or gives the player an obvious advantage. Next on this list is going further away from the rules and more into the category of immersion. Whether you plan on creating a campaign around a preset world such as the Forgotten Realms in D&D, or if you plan on creating your own, it is key for you to know the world that the campaign takes place in. What I mean by this is to know the lore of the world, know the important places, events, people, hierarchies, and organizations that litter the world, so that it feels lived in. This will engage the players in understanding the world their characters are playing in, and will invite them to ask questions regarding the lore. Now, you don't have to know every little detail, but know enough so that when a player asks about something or someone important, you have the answers to give them. This will also assist in the next tip: know your story. If you have the lore for your world, it will be a lot easier to create a campaign around everything that was previously mentioned. Now, when creating a story, it's important for you to understand the direction of the game you want to take it. Before your campaign starts, have an idea of how you want the first few sessions to go down, then have an idea of how you want the last few sessions to go down. Then leave every decision in between to the players. This method will make the campaign's ending feel open-ended and not railroaded, allowing the players' choices to have an effect on the outcome of the campaign. I call this method the river method. I'll explain what I mean. Think of the story like a river, constantly flowing in one direction. The players are the fish swimming within the river. They have plenty of freedom to move around, swimming from right to left to the center, but ultimately still moving forward in the story. The riverbank represents the out-of-bounds area, the moment when the players become sidetracked. If they have reached the riverbank, it is your job to get them back on track, whether it be with plot hooks, promise of in-game wealth, or even tying in some of the players' backstories to the overarching story. Whatever you have to do to get them back on track. What this method accomplishes is the feeling of freedom. Players do not like to be railroaded, it's boring. Players like to feel as though their choices matter, because they do. This leads me to my next tip: know your players. Every player at the table is different, defined by their style of play. Usually, there are 3 styles of play. Number 1 being the explorer. The explorer enjoys solving puzzles and mysteries in the game, understanding the lore of the world, and discovering new places. They enjoy detailed narration of what surrounds their character, which in turn paints an accurate picture in their head. The second type of player is the role player. The role player enjoys doing voices for their character, speaking to NPCs and engaging everyone else to get in character. The role player takes joy in becoming their character. The third type of player is the combat player. These players look for opportunities to engage the enemy with force. They enjoy the mechanics of combat and enjoy showing their character's abilities in combat. The combat player prefers a dungeon crawl, typically. With this information, it is your job to ask what type of player each of your players are. This way, you can more easily mold your story into something that can be fun for everybody. If you have a mixture of each of these kinds of players, try to make each session a mix of play styles. If your sessions usually run about 6 hours long, then set aside 2 hours for exploration, 2 hours for role-playing, and 2 hours for combat so that everyone can enjoy the session. The last tip I have on this list will tie everything together, and that is for you to prep. None of this would matter if you don't have the next session planned out and ready to go. Even if you don't write anything down, at least know what encounters there will be and what challenges your characters will have to face. Now, you can't account for everything that a player may do in the heat of a session, and that's completely okay. Nobody in the history of GMing has 100% predicted the future and got it right every time. It just doesn't happen. I mean, players are so unpredictable, which can be good because those are some of the most memorable moments for players. Now, there's not many steps you can take in the event of a player throwing a monkey wrench, but almost always it will come down to improvisation. Improvisation sets apart a good GM from a great one. Being able to constantly go with the flow no matter what changes the course of the session. And I know it can be a pretty shitty feeling for you when you set up this grand encounter or elaborate puzzle and a player totally goes off the rails and solves it in a whim, but that's our job as a GM, to make sure players are having fun. As long as that remains your goal, then we can all have fun when something like that happens. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like on the video and let us know what tip helped you the most in the comment section, or reach us at our Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Salutations, brave adventurers. Until next, we meet again.